have your views.
Priya, good evening. Krishna ma'am. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you for asking me. It's a huge privilege. Priya, can you hear me? Am I audible properly?
Yes, sir, we all can.
Oh, wonderful. So, right before I begin, a couple of very quick caveats. Like I mentioned briefly earlier, I'm a teacher by default, not by training. This is something that I always wanted to do, and I finally had an opportunity to do it thanks to Sandeep sir, who's also here, about 5-6 years ago. So I have only been actively, formally teaching for the past 5-6 years. Compared to most of you out here, आप लोग सब career academicians हैं, teachers हैं, mentors हैं. So the idea of whatever I share this evening is I'm very, very mindful of the fact that you all have much more experience than I do. So forgive me if I share something that is offensive or that is too obvious to you. I want to essentially talk to you for 5-7 minutes about certain observations I have had regarding this whole idea of learning through art and any kind of alternative methodology of teaching. तो कुछ मैं thoughts अपने share करना चाहूँगा, छोटी मुँह बड़ी बात, but because all of you are very experienced teachers, I'm completely new to this, but I think sometimes, especially in this scenario, the fact that I have no training also is my biggest advantage because I come at this with no baggage at all. So I have not been shoehorned into a certain mold or method of teaching. My entire approach is instinctive and very often quite contrarian and quite unorthodox. So Priya, with your permission, I'm not going to speak too much on the whole online thing, but I want to quickly sort of retrace my very, very modest journey, which will hopefully be interesting and have some learnings for all the faculty at Jaipuria. So,
all yours.
So I went to a school where some of my teachers and my masters always encouraged me to question everything. Now, this is a very, very obvious, simple sort of thing. ये हम सब जानते हैं कि teachers को हमेशा अपने students से questioning ability को बढ़ाना चाहिए. They should encourage that. But my observation is, and the principals here particularly and the teachers, I think will agree with me, that the scenario that has emerged now with such tremendous pressure of completing courses and curricula, that there's very little time that teachers get to do any other kind of mentoring or mentorship outside of the subject course that needs to be completed. So my first and very, very basic observation is that we need to get back to an era and to a time and to an ethos where teachers were teaching much more than the subject they were entrusted with. They were teaching life. They were preparing students for life. And a huge part of that preparation is for a teacher to encourage each student to question the norm, question the paradigm constantly. And that's exactly what my teachers did with me in boarding school, which is why somebody belonging to a fairly orthodox Marwadi business family ended up studying English honors and going to film school and trying to become a filmmaker and is now a teacher today. Because not only did they encourage me to question everything, they also encouraged me to recognize my passions and develop the courage and conviction to stick with those passions no matter what the consequences were. That's one observation I wanted to share with all of you. So in a sense, it was from the very beginning that these teachers perhaps understood the merit of so-called out-of-the-box or alternative thinking, because they were encouraging us to question everything. The other thing that I want to share, which now I'm sort of coming years later into my 5-6 years of teaching, and given my background in the media, I was naturally drawn to teaching writing and communication skills. I think that's the only thing I can teach anyway. What I noticed, Priya and everybody else, is that Indian students, especially in particular, um, when I interact with them and I try and teach them writing and communications and how to write a compelling essay or how to write a compelling article, I find that many students are very good at certain things. What are these certain things? They research the topic very well. They scour the internet for information, statistics, facts, and figures very well, and they collate that information and present it very well. But their pieces are completely devoid of any personal considered opinion. And I have a small theory about why this has been happening over decades and decades and generations, because very few Indian households ever ask their children for their opinion on anything in life. ना हम स्कूल में हमारे बच्चों से पूछते हैं बेटा व्हाट डू यू थिंक अबाउट दिस, ना हम घर में पूछते हैं. एंड फ्रॉम द स्मॉलेस्ट थिंग व्हिच इज व्हाट वुड यू लाइक टू ईट फॉर डिनर, to as the child grows older, what would you like to study, what career would you like to go in for, whom would you like to marry, when would you like to marry, how many children will you have, when you will have them. From the smallest to the largest decisions for an average Indian family are made by everyone else except that individual. They are made by parents, elder siblings, grandparents, society, friends, etc. And therefore I have observed that there is an inherent inability in a lot of Indian students to form their own opinions because they've never been asked to think for themselves. So, when I started interacting with more and more students and found this observation common across the board, I essentially started using another art form, and I'm going to sound very contrarian here. We are talking about reducing screen time. I think for me and my teaching, that's been the greatest ally. Being a student of film myself, I've been using film extensively to cajole my students to start thinking, to start viewing a piece of film from different perspectives, from the points of view of the different characters in that film, whether it's gender politics, whether it's any other kind of communal religious politics. I've been showing them short films that I normally try and research on YouTube, age-appropriate films, where I sort of, question them constantly to come up with their own opinions on what they thought, why they think what they thought, what did they like, why did they like it, what did they dislike, why did they dislike it. All of these things are being done, and it's no, great sort of formula that I've hit upon. But it's a very simple thing that in a generation that is naturally that has natural affinity to the moving visual medium, why not use that constructively to get these minds to start thinking deeply and start thinking critically and analytically. So I do that in my fiction writing lessons. By showing films, I explain 3-act writing, fiction writing structure. I show how to develop characters. I show how to develop character arcs and journeys. And similarly, in the case of non-fiction writing, I'll show a documentary, or I will even show a TED talk or a speech, and then we will analyze it together. And really speaking, 80% of my teaching, what I'm basically doing is I'm being a moderator. Almost, and my class of students are actually the panelists, where I'm only instigating, nudging them to come up with their own thoughts and opinions on a range of issues related to the piece of film that we have just watched. So that is sort of my 2 bits that I wanted to share, and I think I've been extremely successful at using this method, because I find that more and more of my students are now, as a result of having gone through this, for instance, writing their own college application essays for going abroad. something that typically Indian students and their parents ran to a counselor to have done, because they mistook the priority of admissions panels abroad as seeking great flowery language, but that's not what they want. They want to get a glimpse of the individual's personality. And by sort of probing that deeply through moving visual, I'm trying to sort of, in my own small way, use an alternative method that has natural affinity with students to get their minds to start working and contemplating issues, subjects, topics slightly more deeply and in a more personal manner. What I have also done fairly successfully, if I may say so myself, is that I have been using a lot of art. Now, by that, I mean like literally paintings to sort of do the same thing, where we've done a few joint workshops where, for example, an art class will paint, every individual will paint their own piece of art, and then they will the paintings will be swapped, and each student will be asked to write whatever thoughts are coming into his or her head, basis or whatever thoughts are being solicited by that particular painting in that student's mind. It's kind of like the art equivalent of word association. And it has such interesting, tremendous results, because basically what we do is we give the same piece of art to, let's say, 5 different students, and their interpretations are so wildly different. And then when the students come together and they see all the different interpretations of that same piece of art that their peers and colleagues have had, it gives them a further insight into how different perspectives work, and the fact that there is no one sort of right or wrong perspective. There is nothing like that. So yeah, that's essentially what I wanted to share. Question everything. I think as teachers and mentors, despite all the hugely increased administrative pressure, paperwork pressure that teachers have nowadays, with having to prepare the lesson plans 1 year in advance and blah blah blah, that I think we ought to be mindful of our very, very basic duty of preparing our wards for life, and not just in physics or chemistry or the subject that's been assigned to us. And let's use the arts. There's a whole gamut and bouquet of them, ranging from performing arts to drama to film to painting to sculpture, to basically instigate a certain critical thought process. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it's really good how you got your classroom learnings to all the teachers out here. And I was just writing, I think, on Vaishali ma'am's comment also, that as a dance woman therapy practitioner, I know how much art has also helped in healing people. So, any form of art for that fact. And talking about critical and analytical skills, it took me back to my college days, where we were made to watch 12 Angry Men, Ek Ruka Hua Faisla, and how we were asked to interpret that, and every individual had a very different interpretation to it, and I think critical thinking just came in place there as well. So thank you so much for getting your experiences on table. I think a lot of us learned a lot from there also.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
If I can just add again.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was just going to add this, that you can ask your questions to your children, your students, but if you do not know the answer by chance, accept that you do not know the answer and tell them that you're going to get back to them with the answer. It is very important. It is very important to accept that you do not know the answer. We are not superhumans, we are just trying to help our next generation. So I think that acceptance of not knowing also is very, very important.
Also breaking hierarchy, I think it does help in breaking hierarchy.
It will.
At the same level.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Wherever possible, the first thing I do is is this whole traditional classroom setup of the teacher being at a certain pedestal physically, and the student being at a lower level is just is bizarre, because it's such poor body language and power dynamics set up from the outset, that it needs to be at a level playing field.
And thankfully, the online medium does this for us. Everybody is on the same platform, and theater does it too. So I think please use it to your own benefit. Don't feel that this is something that should not be done. It is the way of life now. It is going to be this way for a very long time, guys. So I think we have to gear up ourselves, for this. Thank you so much. I will have to take a
A terrible internet infrastructure is the greatest leveler.
Absolutely. Sweet are the uses of adversity. So I have to quickly go because I have a class at 5. And thank you so much, ma'am, again, Krishna ma'am.